Edward V of England, November 4th, 1470, c. 1483, was a Yorkist monarch of England. Born on November 4th, 1470 at Westminster Abbey in London, Edward V was the son of Edward IV and Elizabeth Woodville. He reigned from April 9, 1483 until his deposed approximately 2 months later. He then disappeared along with his younger brother, and the cause and date of his death are uncertain, but it is believed that he died in 1483, possibly in the Tower of London. He was reigned during the reign of his uncle Richard, Duke of Gloucester. After Edward V and his younger brother Richard, Duke of York, were sent to the Tower of London for their own safety, they have not been seen since. It is believed that he was murdered. After Edward V and his brother were sent to the Tower of London, he was never seen again. His disappearance is a mystery, and has been described in many books. It is believed that he was assassinated, and that other possible conspirators included Richard III, Henry Stafford, 2nd Duke of Buckingham, and Henry Tudor, who defeated Richard III and became King Henry VII of England. Richard of Shrewsbury, 1st Duke of York and 1st Duke of Norfolk, August 17, 1473-1483. Richard was the second son of his elder brother, Prince Edward, of Edward IV of England and Elizabeth Woodville. Richard was born in Shrewsbury. Richard and his brother were imprisoned in the Tower of London, which at that time was both the royal residence and prison, in 1483, after his uncle, King Richard III of England, seized power and declared him an illegitimate son by Act of Parliament, claiming that the marriage of his parents was illegitimate. In the summer of the same year of his imprisonment, both princes disappeared without a trace. The fate of the two princes is therefore unknown, but it is concluded that they died or were killed in the tower. In addition, there is no evidence of a funeral if they died naturally. The Tower of London or Tower of London is an architectural structure built after William, Duke of Normandy, was crowned King of England on Christmas Day 1066 at Westminster Abbey. After defeating King Harold of Saxon, King William ordered the construction of fortifications to protect London, the capital of the new kingdom. One of these castles was located to the southeast of the Roman city walls, in order to observe the entire Thames and the city in a wide angle. In addition, for safety, a canal was dug around the castle, closing the angle between the inner and outer walls. 10 years after the reign, King William ordered the small fort to be transformed into a large stone castle, and named the place the Tower of London. Later, the buildings in this area expanded and became wider. The tower in the center of all the architecture was called the White Tower. The tower where the murder of the two princes took place was called the Bloody Tower, which was the control point for the entrance and exit gates. It was originally called the Garden Tower because it was near the garden. The incident occurred in 1483 when King Edward IV died. His son, Prince Edward, aged 12, was to succeed to the throne. However, it turned out that King Richard, Duke of Gloucester, seized the throne and established himself as King Richard III by imprisoning Prince Edward and his younger brother in the tower until no one saw them. The deaths of the two princes remained a mystery, although the bodies of two children were found buried in a field near the White Tower in 1974 and they were reburied at Westminster Abbey. But it is not clear whether they were the two princes. February 18, 1999. The Tower of Blood was used as a residence and prison for two princes, 12-year-old King Edward V and his 9-year-old brother, Prince Richard, Duke of York. It is said that King Richard III had his nephews killed so that he could ascend to the throne. The room where the two princes are said to have slept before they were abducted is on the 2nd floor of the Tower of Blood. The stone staircase leading up is quite narrow. The room beyond the stairs is 4 by 5 meters and has white walls. Phil Wilson, a Tower of London officer who also stayed on the grounds, explained why people believe the ghosts of the two princes still linger in the Tower of Blood. At the Tower of Blood, people have occasionally seen King Edward V and his brother Prince Richard. They were both wearing white bedclothes, holding hands, standing still, and then slowly disappearing into the walls of the room. There have also been reports of two boys, almost the same age, playing in various places in the tower. Richard is said to have the Duke of Gloucester, his uncle, ordered the killing of the two princes so that he could take the throne instead. According to history, after the death of the two princes' father, King Edward IV, on April 9, 1483, his uncle, Richard, Duke of Gloucester, became regent and took the young princes to the Tower of London. Prince Edward was preparing to be crowned as King Edward V, but in the end, it was his uncle who became King Richard III. At that time, the two princes were still alive, but then mysteriously disappeared. The second-floor room in the Tower of Blood, which is said to be the room where the incident occurred, has a short video from Sir Laurence Olivier's 1955 film about the disappearance of the two princes. In the film, the prince's uncle ordered his aide to put a pillow over the mouths and noses of the two princes while they slept. In the film, the prince's uncle ordered his aide to put a pillow over the mouths and noses of the two princes while they slept. In 1674, craftsmen who were breaking down the stone steps south of the White Tower in the Tower of London found two skulls of children. At that time, people believed that they belonged to the two princes, and King Charles II, who was reigning, ordered the bones to be taken to Westminster Abbey. According to other sources, one night, a guard on duty at the Tower of London reported seeing a strange phenomenon. On the spiral staircase of the tower, they saw dark shadows that looked like two people, half running, half walking together. And there was a small voice giggling cheerfully, but he looked hard and could not see the figure until the shadow passed him. The guard reported that the two shadows, resembling two children, walked hand in hand, down the stairs and floated past him. This event was recorded in the log of the guards of the tower. And the tower in question was the Bloody Tower, which used to hold two young princes. Here is a story about the unfortunate princes of England. In the time of King Edward IV, the King of England, with his younger brother Richard as Duke of Gloucester. At that time, the throne was shaken by enemies on all sides, and the younger brother tried to undermine his brother by secretly joining the former King Henry VI. Civil war broke out, and it seemed that the rebels had the upper hand. Then Queen Elizabeth, who was pregnant, gave birth to a little prince, named Little Edward. The birth of this heir gave King Edward the strength to turn the situation from bad to good. Both the younger brothers returned to the king as before. Then the queen gave birth to a second son named Richard, following the uncle's name, who became the Duke of York. The country was about to enter a state of peace, but King Edward, who had been hard at war for a long time, fell ill and died. At that time, young Prince Edward, aged 12, was staying at Ludlow House, and younger brother Richard, aged 9, was staying with their mother in another place. When the king died, young Edward was invited to return to the throne, according to the will that King Edward had drawn up, with his uncle Richard as the one who went to receive him. When reaching the city limits of London, Richard, Duke of Gloucester, put on a play, dismounting from his horse and walking like a horseman beside the young king, to show the people that he was extremely loyal. But when he entered the palace walls, he took young Edward to stay in a tower that seemed more prepared to welcome prisoners than kings. Then, as the regent until the young Edward came of age, he accused Queen Elizabeth of being an illegitimate queen because at the time of his marriage to King Edward IV, King Edward already had a wife, making the marriage void, which meant that the young Edward was not worthy of the throne. When the incident happened, he used his power to imprison the young king in the tower and sent soldiers to invite his younger brother Richard, Duke of York, to imprison him together, causing Queen Elizabeth to be heartbroken. Then Richard, his uncle, took the throne instead of his grandson in full. He ordered the killing of everyone who tried to help the two children. But since there were still many people loyal to the young Edward, he decided to eliminate his two real grandsons. As for King Edward the Young and his younger brother, when they were imprisoned, they suffered greatly, but they always looked after each other to comfort each other. The two of them were never apart. They hugged each other as if to protect each other all the time. Especially the older brother, when he knew that he had been dethroned, he seemed to know his fate. After a while, the two young princes were never seen again. Everyone assumed that they were murdered, but no one knows what their fate was. However, the most reliable account comes from Sir Thomas More, who wrote that the two princes died from suffocation, which was done by the executioner pressing them down with force, side by side, at night. The bodies were then put in crude coffins and buried under the steps of St. John's Cathedral, covered with cement. However, the throne seized from the innocent did not last long as it was thought. When the army of the old king, King Henry VI, approached the city, the battle for the throne broke out again, and Richard was defeated. The war was called the Wars of the Roses, because each side used a different color rose on Bosworth fields as a symbol. No general was willing to stand by a traitorous and cruel person like him anymore. Richard's naked body was dragged by horses throughout the city. After that, the body was never found again. It is believed that it was thrown into the River Soar, or buried in what is now a car park in Leicester. Henry then ascended to the throne again, marrying Queen Elizabeth of York, ending the long war between the two sides, and giving birth to a new rose, red and white stripes, called the Tudor Rose. 200 years later, the Blood Tower was dusted off and rebuilt because it was too old. It was renovated. During the renovation, the repairmen found a secret room with a small entrance at the base of the spiral staircase. When they went in, they found a hidden wooden chest. They opened it and found two white skeletons lying next to each other. When they tested it using modern methods, they found that the skeletons belonged to the two little princes. This completely ended the mystery of the disappearance of the two princes. The names of the murderers will be recorded in history forever. After that, no one has seen the ghost of the little prince again.